Hello and welcome to the M.B.Om podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. M.B.Om is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at M.B.Om, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hey friends, I just wanted to pop in and talk a little bit about M.B.Om behind the scenes. When I entered the yoga world as a teacher, I was surprised by how many yoga teachers were struggling with the business side of yoga. And that's why I created M.B.Om. M.B.Om helps yoga teachers and studio owners become entrepreneurs. It helps you to go from surviving to thriving with your yoga business. I am on a mission to change the yoga industry, to teach yoga teachers and studio owners about the business of yoga, and to help you feel more confident, successful, and abundant. After releasing hundreds of podcast episodes, I want to create content that dives deeper into helping yoga entrepreneurs thrive and elevate their businesses. This is where M.B.Om Behind the Scenes comes in. Each week, you will get bonus content from the weekly guest or myself, diving deeper into how you can take the teachings and apply them to your business. This podcast is designed for yoga teachers and studio owners who are ready to take it to the next level. If you enjoy M.B.Om and have been looking for an affordable way to learn more, this is it. For the cost of 2 lattes per month, you will get never-before-heard content that you can't access anywhere else that will give you tangible ways to dive deeper into your yoga business. If this sounds like something you're interested in, let's dive in. Head on over to patreon.com/MBM yoga and sign up to get behind the scenes now. Once again, that's patreon.com/MBOM yoga to get all the exclusive behind the scenes content. I'll see you there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the M.B.Om podcast. This episode of the podcast is brought to you in part by OfferingTree. OfferingTree is your one-stop shop for all things website, email marketing, memberships, online store, and more. They are seriously the best thing that has happened to yoga teachers and their yoga businesses. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about them a little bit later on, so stay tuned for that. This week on the podcast, I am super excited to be joined by Caitlin Schneider. Caitlin is the owner and founder of Caitlin Red Yoga. She is a corporate wellness provider where she brings her virtual yoga-based program, Caitlin Red Corporate Wellness, to companies across the country. She is also a female employee wellness coach where she offers her signature wellness program to women who are mistreated in the workplace via her Facebook group, Be Unfwithable, support for emotionally abused women in the workplace. And on this episode, we're diving into so much good stuff. We're talking about Caitlin's yoga journey, how she got into teaching. We're talking about the corporate wellness side of things and how just as Caitlin was getting her business going, boom, everything went online. We talk about how she pivoted, how she's found her niche, and so much more. So there's lots of good stuff in this episode, and I hope that you enjoy listening to this as much as I enjoyed chatting with Caitlin. All right, here she is. Welcome to the podcast today, Caitlin. I'm really excited to have you here with me.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Where are you joining me from today?
I am joining you from Long Island. I live in Seaford, which is kind of close to the border between Nassau and Suffolk County on Long Island.
Amazing. It's a place in the US that I haven't visited. I've spent a lot of time traveling throughout the US, and the Northeast is just a place that is, when I look at the states I've been to, I really need to spend more time up in the Northeast.
Yeah, definitely. I would say the best times to come here, obviously, when COVID's not around, would be like June and maybe early July are like the best weather times. It is a big travel time. So like a lot of people do come during that time, but you'll get like the best weather. It won't be too rainy because we can have pretty rainy springs. So it's kind of like the nice peak between our rainy spring and then when it starts to get brutally hot. And there's really no smooth transition a lot of times. So you get like a 2-week period of like, oh, this is nice. And then it just gets dreadful.
Oh my gosh. Sounds amazing. Well, hopefully I'll get to plan a trip there soon. And I'm really excited to dive into all things corporate wellness, online corporate wellness, and everything having to do with your business and what you're up to. But I want to back up a little bit and talk a little bit about your yoga story. Can you tell me a bit about how you first got into yoga?
Sure. It's a little bit dark. It was at a time when I was going through a lot of personal issues, which I feel like maybe that's not too uncommon for a lot of us who start yoga. I was suffering from a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of hypochondria, which I guess is like kind of depression's ugly cousin. And I had just been fired from a job that I had for 6 years. It really wasn't working out. I had a boss that was really terrible. I just didn't really know how to handle the situation. Looking back, I'm sure there were other ways I could have gone about it, but at the end of the day, they decided to just let me go. So I was really, really lost. I had no idea what I was going to do. I owned a home. I was like, oh my God, I have a mortgage. How am I going to afford my life and all this stuff? And I just was in a really deep hole financially and mentally. And, I tell this story a lot and people laugh, but I actually got the idea to try yoga from the Real Housewife of New Jersey, Teresa Giudice. Like she went on TV. I think it was around the time when I was kind of like in a depressive state. I was watching like Access Hollywood or E whatever. And she was a guest and she was talking about how she just had done her prison sentence and she was doing yoga in prison. And if we're all familiar with who she is, like she was always known to be like the rageaholic. And I very much like kind of identify with that. I was very an angry person. I'm a redhead, so naturally I have an angry streak. So, being, having the anxiety and all just kind of the personal issues, I was very much like hot and cold. Like I'd either just be completely disassociated or like sort of in a rage spiral. So I saw her and how calm she was. And I was like, wow, if she could not only make it through prison, which, who knows what kind of prison situation she was actually in. She could have been like in, like a club fed situation or, just seeing like, she was always like the crazy flipping tables chick. And she seems really calm, like really, really calm. Not only did, she looked great. And I was like, I should really give that a shot. I mean, I kind of ran out of options as far as like what I could do to help myself. So it was in my basement. I turned on Amazon Prime. I was not really in a position to really leave the house. I just was kind of doing the hermit life. And I was like, let me do something, by myself so I don't go out somewhere and get intimidated because I have no idea what I'm doing. And I put on Amazon Prime. I did like a 30-day yoga challenge type situation. And I made it through the 30 days. And I have to say, like, after even midway through the 30 days, I like started to feel such a shift and just felt so much more calm. Like I felt not so afraid I was like so afraid of my body and just being with myself and with my thoughts. And I just didn't want to be alone. And I was like, all right, how am I supposed to lay in Shavasana and not think about stuff and, all those things that go through your head. And it really just was such a huge transformation. Like everybody in my life and my friends and family noticed just how much more, happier I was and how devoted I was to it. And it was just like, it changed everything, changed my whole entire life.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm so grateful that you were able to find that practice. I always find it really interesting to kind of hear how we come to yoga. And it's interesting because I feel like, one, like, I guess, piece of health and wellness advice that, would be given out would be like, cut the reality TV out of your life and you might start to feel better. But it's so interesting that that was actually where you discovered this practice that ended up, changing your life in a big way. So I find that a really interesting piece to that. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about your journey into becoming a yoga teacher. So what got you from, this 30-day challenge that you were doing on Amazon Prime to becoming a yoga teacher?
It was actually a pretty quick transition, which I was a little bit shocked. And maybe because I was still in sort of like I don't really know what I'm doing in my life kind of situation. And I just went with the flow, which is great because I tend to get into my head really easily and overthink stuff. So I just went with my instinct. And I had a lot of people who, I started kind of posting pictures of myself doing yoga and just like little clips. Cause I like to film myself when I was doing it at first, just to kind of look back and be like, all right, did I have this alignment properly? Is my back, like when you watch and you just go, right, make sure I don't hurt myself and just look over stuff. So I actually became brave enough at one point to start posting my videos and people were like, you're so good. You should really teach. And, they would talk about their yoga teachers and be like, they're not like, that great. Like I can't relate to them, but I know you. And I know that you're cause I'm like kind of a heavy metal chick. Like I love heavy metal music. That's my thing. So they were like, I'd love to have someone like you be my teacher. Cause I know that you are so relatable. And I was like, all right, but I just started doing yoga. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never taught anybody anything. Like I've never been a teacher. So one day I was on, I think it was Instagram, and I joined like one of those um, challenges. I think it was like a 5-day or 20-day challenge or something of just doing a yoga pose of the day. You post your picture. And it was with my teacher. Like I didn't realize it was her hosting that challenge. I think I just saw it through a hashtag. So I joined the challenge. I looked up who she was. I found her Facebook group. I joined her Facebook group. I actually ended up winning that challenge, which is really cool. So she took notice and she actually reached out to me directly and was like, "Hey, I see you're in my group. Have you ever thought about becoming a yoga teacher? I've been watching your videos that you put up. I look back to your Instagram and all your things, and you really take a liking to not just like the practice itself, but you just seem like you have a really cool personality. Like I would love it if you would maybe consider joining my yoga teacher training." And I was like, okay. I was like, why not? I had enough people kind of telling me I should do it. I should do it. And I was in like this weird crossroads in my life. And I'm like, I might as well give it a shot and see where this takes me. And, not only would I then learn a lot more about yoga itself, at the end of the day, I can end up teaching people. And if people actually want to learn with me, then maybe that's a sign. So that's really how I kind of got into teaching. I ended up getting my certification with her, and rest is history.
Yeah, I love that story. I love how you just dove in and went for it. It's very awesome to hear. And I'm curious, like, where did the niche of corporate wellness come from? How did you kind of get into that?
I knew when I became a yoga teacher that I wanted to find a way to help my community. And my community has always been corporate. I live, I've lived in the boroughs in the city. I've, always lived on Long Island for the most part. So I worked in Manhattan from, pretty much like 13 years of my life. So I just knew, I was like, I would think back to of like, if I only had started doing yoga back then, or if I had somebody that could have, if I had gone, if I had a teacher or somebody like kind of be my sort of coach, and, maybe that would have turned out differently. And when I sort of removed myself from the corporate setting, because when I was doing my yoga teacher training, I ended up working at a different job that was local, and it was a residential construction company. So it was like corporate on paper, but it wasn't corporate. I was wearing hoodies and leggings to work, which was awesome. So it was very laid back. I just was thinking like, I'd love to be able to help the people who could possibly very well be in my situation that I was in, where you're at a job, you're miserable. It's not your ideal job. Obviously, you're just going into an office. You're probably like an admin, like I was, that was maybe being treated unfairly and, not really given great salaries. And you're just kind of struggling, getting by, hating it. So I just always knew that I wanted to give back in that way. So I was a part of a coaching program that was teaching us how to become private yoga teachers. And she's somebody who I met through my yoga teacher trainer. She was actually a guest in my class. So I was like, oh, private yoga, I should do that because I live in such a great area that I think that would really take off. And then through her, I met my corporate yoga coach, and that clicked. I was like, that is something, not only do I know what it's like to work in corporate and I understand the pain points and the stressors and just like, being like, oh, this is miserable. I wish I had somebody like to kind of relieve me during the day and some kind of de-stressor. I had a big network, like not only just people I used to work with, but my whole family works in corporate. Like it's just, this is my sort of life. So I was like, you know what, this could end up being pretty successful. I think I can really get into this. Not only that, but then you can offer like higher ticket prices and really, make this like a full-time gig. So I was like, let me do that. So I enrolled in the corporate yoga coaching program. And that was about a year ago. So yeah, it's almost a full year now that I've been working with that coach.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. I love that finding that was just kind of like an instant connection to you. And I think it's really cool. I find that corporate yoga is an interesting one with yoga teachers because I've heard from some yoga teachers who are like, I want so far away from corporate. Like, it's not even funny. Like, I have no interest in, teaching people in corporate or teaching to people in corporate or entering corporate spaces. And then other people feel very connected to it. And I think I definitely feel sort of a similar connection, like you said, because my yoga journey was really influenced while I worked in corporate. I came from a corporate business background, and that's when my yoga practice was probably the most important and most influential in my life. And I just think about how I was comfortable going to a studio and I was able to afford to go to a studio. And I think there's a lot of people that don't identify as being yogis and they don't go to the studio, yet this practice can benefit them in such amazing ways so that they can thrive in their job and all that type of stuff. So I really love hearing that was something that connected for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now it's time for a short break from the show to talk about our sponsor, OfferingTree. If you're interested in finding an all-in-one platform for online or in-person teaching, then you should definitely check out OfferingTree. OfferingTree set out to make creating your digital presence fun, easy, and affordable. With one click, you can build a website, run online or in-person live classes, sell pre-recorded classes, manage memberships and packages, and much more. Communicating with your students is seamless and easy with their automated email system and email marketing tools. Already have your own website? No problem, because OfferingTree can embed seamlessly into your existing website. They're always adding new features to their platform to make it even better. They just recently released the online store feature that lets you easily sell digital content like yoga videos, challenges, and courses right from your website. If you're looking for a single platform to take care of all of your online and in-person teaching needs, then visit OfferingTree.com/M.B.Om. OfferingTree has been supporting M.B.Om for over a year now, and I not only love the product, but I also love the people. OfferingTree is providing special pricing for M.B.Om listeners, so be sure to visit OfferingTree.com/M.B.O.M. That's OfferingTree.com/M.B.O.M. to receive the discount. All right, now back to the episode. And so you mentioned having a big network and diving into this coaching program. Can you tell me a little bit about what things were like for you as you dove into this niche of corporate wellness?
Well, it was interesting because like you said, like once I started teaching yoga, I wanted absolutely nothing to do with corporate. And when I started doing yoga and all that stuff, I was like, I am never going back to Manhattan. I'm never working in an office, like never doing that again. So it was like, it took a little bit of convincing on my part to be like, all right, well, I'm not being a corporate employee anymore. I'm going in to teach yoga and stuff. So I'm not getting sucked into that life again. So, my coach made it pretty clear, like, this isn't what you think. Cause I really didn't know much about it. I just was like something about teaching people in an office and that sounds right. But I don't want to go back into any kind of like weird situation and all that kind of stuff. So my coach made it very clear, obviously, what I was getting into. So at first I was really just diving deep into learning everything I can learn, all the trainings, how to market myself. I had zero business background. So I really needed to kind of learn exactly and take on that business owner role, which was a weird transition for me because I've been an employee forever. So now I had to really make that mindset shift of I'm not coming in as someone's employee. I am the boss of my business and I'm setting my prices. I'm, setting up my own package of benefits and offers and all these things. And, when I'm talking to the decision makers, I'm the leader of the conversation. So these were things that I had to sort of maybe face my fears a little bit as far as when you're speaking to a higher up in corporate, like my past experiences have always been a little bit traumatic as far as they're not always the nicest people in the world sometimes. And, you can kind of feel inferior. So I had to do a lot of mindset work as far as I'm a boss and I'm coming at them as a boss and, mutual respect. I'm here to offer something absolutely amazing for your people. So what happened too, now this is going to be going into the COVID situation, is once I was really ready to take off and go into the offices, because I never actually taught in person for corporate, COVID hit. So that was March. And I was left to oh my God, what am I going to do? I was really all set and prepared to go, into an office building, set up all my stuff and teach in person. All my offers were in person. My pitch was in person stuff. So I had to take a step back and assess and be like, is this going to still work? And my coach, even, she had to change up everything that she was pretty much offering too, because she was teaching us all obviously in-person stuff. So when she made the shift of no, this can absolutely still work, in an online environment now that everybody's working remotely. And to be honest, I really actually enjoyed the accessibility of being online, because I personally would calculate in my head, like, all right, if I go in at this time, I have to leave my house at this time and catch that train and go into the city and be on the subway. And how do I get my stuff over there? So once everything shifted to online, I was like, this sounds so much easier. And I can actually have a lot more clients than I probably had planned on the beginning. And not only people who are local to me, but I could go across the country. I can go around the world if I wanted to, just depending, obviously, if time zones make sense. But it just seemed like it opened up a lot more doors. So in a sense, I'm glad that I never started teaching in person and had to then step back and make that transition. It was weird fate of just like, no, we're going online. Like I'm such an online person. I'm a homebody. So I really like, my upstairs home studio and just getting on the computer. Like I said before, I taught myself yoga from my TV in the basement with a fire stick. So I knew, and I actually took my yoga teacher training online too. So for me, I was like, this just is all like a weird, like universal message of like, you were meant to do this. You learned online, you trained online, you can move online too. Don't be intimidated. So I just listened to my intuition and was like, okay, I'm going online. This is it.
Yeah. Wow. That does sound very synchronistic. I can imagine, though, there was probably a period when, right as you're like really gearing up your business, and then boom, pandemic hits and we get like a work from home, stay at home order. Can you talk a little bit about like what your mindset was like as you realized that, crap, this thing I've been working towards, I'm not going to be able to do?
I mean, it was definitely like a hiccup, and I was definitely a little afraid. I actually had been laid off as well from my company because they were construction. So, they had like the New York pause where everything stopped. So I was home. I wasn't working remotely just because there was really nothing for me to do. So I was on unemployment, and it just also again, like a universal something told me like, now you have this time, like you should really utilize that time to do as much research as you can, do as much as your market research, see where everybody is, see what everybody's doing. Like all my friends in corporate, check in with them. I actually started a Facebook group that in the beginning, I was using it to really kind of get a feel and do my research as far as my corporate offers would, pertain to. And I got a lot of feedback from people just feeling like so isolated and afraid. And I think what helped me actually not be as afraid and scared, only, for my personal safety and obviously my financial, I could easily sit there and be like, oh my God, I don't have a job and I'm only getting unemployment and, I have less money coming in. I could not easily sit there and freak out about that stuff. But I just took the opportunity to really reach out to people and hear what they were saying, see how they were feeling so that I could turn it into something that would benefit. And I was actually doing a lot of things within that group just to help the people that I knew were stuck at home. I knew corporate really wasn't making the decisions at that time to bring people in on an online situation yet. So I was really I don't want to say taking advantage of the situation, but using the situation as it was and saying like, hey, I know we all can't go to our gyms. I know we're stuck at home, but I have my group. I'll do like weekly yoga flows for you guys and meditations. And I just want to keep in touch with all of you to see that if you like what you're seeing here and the yoga that I'm teaching, this is something I'm working towards transitioning into, the online corporate wellness for your company when they're ready to make that decision. So that's really what I was doing during the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you were able to kind of look at it from the perspective of how I can shift this. And, this is kind of like a wink from the universe and kind of almost like, okay, it's go time. It's time for me to do this. And so I know that most of us as yoga teachers, I don't know if there's like any yoga teacher that hasn't been impacted by this whole crazy year that is 2020. Can you talk a little bit about sort of what you did to take your business online and just what it looked like or what it looks like to run an online corporate wellness business?
Well, what I did was, and I did a couple of things. I still maintained working with my corporate wellness coach and really gearing myself up to go and take my corporate wellness online. And I was also working with another group of business coaches to, because when I made that Facebook group and I was working with people on more of like an individual basis, that's when I was like, you know what, I could start my own program, like on the side, like a wellness coaching. So right now I'm sort of working in those two angles of like corporate wellness online with, corporations, and then also building out my own corporate wellness program. Now that's taking a little bit of time just because I was really kind of trying to find my niche, and I was experimenting with different niches and stuff. So I've actually recently just landed like what I feel like is my perfect niche, and is working out really well so far. And I can see it going really, really, really well. So what I am doing there was, sorry, I'm just getting off track. What I did was I enrolled with those other business coaches to really help me develop as a business leader, as a coach, because I was doing the yoga teaching, but I really had no idea where like coaching was and what that entailed, and like how to create like a high ticket signature wellness program offer outside of corporate. And also kind of using the opportunity to, while working with people on an individual basis, I could also then get leads for corporate and be like, hey, by the way, if you happen to know somebody in corporate that, or yourself, we can work in another way. I can come into your company and teach you yoga that way. So I really used two of the coaching programs I was in to my advantage, as far as like, obviously doing the corporate wellness and then gaining the confidence as a business owner. All the mindset shifts that I'd been an employee forever, like I mentioned earlier. So really kind of having somebody help me hold myself accountable for, if I set a schedule, that I stick to it. If I have goals to reach for the week, I meet them, because I can kind of easily just, it's easy to slack, especially if you're home. So that's really tough. You have to make sure that you're working with people that are there to support you, hold you accountable, hold yourself accountable, all that kind of stuff. So that's really what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. And I'm curious about that niching down process, because this is something I talk quite a bit about on the podcast. And I mean, I know personally it's not easy. It's not easy to really specify your niche. Can you talk a little bit about what that process was like, and what niche you've landed on?
That process was very difficult. And it's scary because I know everybody's afraid to really pick something, because you either feel like you're excluding people, or if you make that decision, you're locked into it. So I know I don't know if they really all say like you should pick like one niche and that's it. So I kind of have two, and I know that sounds terrible, but I'm able to make both work because they're kind of very, very much almost separate. So like I have my corporate side, which, me personally, I think this fits my personality, because I can be Caitlin, the corporate person, and then I can be like the real Caitlin, where, this is kind of where I went with my niche. Like I started working with people just sort of in a work-life balance situation. And that was a nice niche, but I just didn't feel like it was powerful enough. So I was really working over the last 2 months to find something that was really powerful, that really spoke to people's pain points, and trying to get them to transition into, healthier mindset, mental well-being, all that stuff. Then I shifted over into working with people who, like, because this had happened to me. Like I was very much, I would feel like emotionally abused in the workplace. I was bullied a lot by several bosses, not treated really nicely. People spoke to me that, if that had been recorded, they probably would have been fired and sued and all those things. But I got really intimidated and fearful. So I really wanted to work with those people too. But I just also felt like that wasn't working also. Like it was a very powerful niche, but just the way that I was framing it really wasn't taking people out of that pain, because that's what I really wanted to do. I don't want to like dwell in a situation. I want to say like, we're here or you're here in a situation, but we need to go somewhere else. We need to go to a positive place. So then that's kind of when I really rethought everything. I went back to my, starting point. Like, why did I start doing yoga? Why did I feel weird about starting yoga? Because I definitely hid the fact that I did yoga for a while, because as a heavy metal chick, I'm like, am I going to sell out if I tell people I'm doing yoga? Like, that's not very heavy metal. Like that's not rock and roll. So I struggled with that for a bit. So then I decided, you know what? I need to create some kind of container for people like me who really didn't, like you said earlier, don't identify as a yogi per se, really kind of don't know where they belong, not only just in the yoga and the wellness world, but just in the world in general. Like people like me who grew up a little bit like an outsider, a little bit of an outcast, a bit of a rebel, like listening to heavy metal music and just sort of not really fitting in, and also trying to be confident in that kind of weirdness about themselves. And I feel like through yoga, I've been able to own the fact that I am different. I am not, I would say, like the cookie cutter sort of wellness teacher. And I wanted to break out of that because I really felt like I was getting lost in the wellness world of like watching what other people are doing and not, and just being like, well, maybe I have to be like her. Maybe I have to be like that. Like maybe I have to speak like this. Maybe I have to dress like that. And I really lost my way. I was like, I don't even know what I'm becoming. So I took a step back and I actually consulted my coaches. I'm like, am I allowed to be myself? And I just, it's such a weird thing to ask, but I explained to them, I'm like, because myself is a little weird. I'm a little unconventional. And they were like, that's exactly who you need to be. And I was like, okay, so now I'm going to be that person. And then they say always be the client you want to attract. And I'm like, all right, so if that's who I am, these are the people I want to attract. So I'm looking for the people who, again, like would be so intimidated to step into a yoga studio. Don't identify with like the big cheesy smiles all the time that, kind of people see all everywhere. And they're like, that person really that happy? Like people who just aren't like super bubbly, like, that, you know what I'm saying? So I was like, I think I can make this work. I know like there's a lot of people who say like, they just don't have the yoga body or, that kind of stuff. So that's really where I'm taking my new niche. So I would say like it's for women who just feel like they're a bit, I don't want to say unconventional in an insulting way, but just the unconventional type of woman, maybe a little bit rough on the edges. So that's kind of the container that I'm now working towards. And it seems pretty successful. People are resonating with it. People love it. I can be brutally honest and speak my truth, which people really appreciate. And I'm just encouraging everybody in there to do the same. And just don't be afraid to be yourself.
Yeah. No, I really love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I've had another yoga teacher on the podcast. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. Her name's Nick Danu.
No.
Okay, you should cross paths with her. She describes her niche as like yoga for misfits.
Oh,
and
cute.
Yeah, she was
I
like
like
a
that.
hairstylist before, and she's like, yeah, my hair is always like really edgy and weird colors, and she's like, I've never really fit in with this typical sort of look that you have with yoga teachers. And I think it's so interesting because I've talked to so many people now that are so different and unique and doing these really cool, amazing, like extremely unique things in the yoga world. And it gives me hope for the fact that hopefully we're moving away from this idea that you have to be, a certain body type, typically like long, lean, skinny, maybe blonde, probably white, super
Right.
flexible. And if you don't look like that, you can't do yoga. And I don't mean to stereotype to somebody who is, skinny and blonde and white, because there's many
Right.
amazing humans out there who are like that. But just creating spaces that feel, more diverse, where it's like, oh, you like heavy metal music, like I've got a space for you. And I think that finding these kind of like unconventional niches and markets and serving those people, because if you're that person and you found yoga in this kind of unconventional way, there's people who are also having that same thought process of like, I hear about this thing, it could probably help me, but I see these photos and these studios and it just doesn't feel like a place for me. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I personally am not a fan of like, something I'm trying to like really drive in the group is like this toxic positivity that like, you see these quotes everywhere of just like, just be positive. And that's like, that's not realistic. We may not be happy all the time. And that doesn't mean like, I think the big misconception for myself was like, I remember thinking, I can't do yoga because I'm not happy. I can't do yoga because I'm not, a smiley person. Like, so I just really want that message to go out there of like, you do yoga obviously to become happy. You do yoga to balance your emotions. And it's okay if you come to yoga class a little bit pissed off. Like sometimes I am about to teach a class where I'm like a little bit angry, but it's like all emotions are validated in my container, come as you are, um, you know, all vibes only kind of thing, or all vibes are welcome, situation. Because I just feel like a lot of the times, like, the the stereotypical sort of situation of like what yoga is and who you need to be, like just scares a lot of people away that need that extra help for their mental well-being and their mental health. And especially what's going on right now in the world with like COVID and everybody feeling so alone and isolated. Like it would just be cool for somebody who was like me, that's, was a teenager in high school or whatever, that wearing a Slipknot shirt is looking for some way to like vent out their anger. Cause even like with me, like in yoga, like I have I bring anger to the mat and I release it there. And I need, instead of somebody hurting themselves, like I'd love them to have an alternative and say, hey, come to the yoga. If you're mad, I'll put on a Slipknot song for you and we'll do yoga with Slipknot on. And then you'll feel so much better. Like, cause that helps me. So I know that's going to help someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I've never been a heavy metal gal myself, but my brother used to like Slipknot, so that's why it's making me smile to think about that. But I think that you bring up such a good point of like in yoga, our mat should be this safe space for us to show up with whatever we need. Our sadness, our grief, our anger, our rage, our frustration, whatever it is. It shouldn't be this like idea that you have to show up a certain way. And I think that there are, certainly connotations out there that yoga makes you happy or it makes you feel a certain way, or to come to yoga you need to feel a certain way. And I just think about, as teachers, one of our biggest jobs is to hold space for whatever students have to feel. And I love that you're doing that in such an intentional way. And it's cool. I've seen some other people doing things like rage yoga or heavy metal yoga. There was a studio that I did a training at in Atlanta that had a weekly class that was like a metal yoga class. And so if you like metal music, you can come, and it's just like a standard vinyasa flow class. And I was like, like I said, I personally don't like metal music, but I was like, that's such a cool idea to have this theme for people who love this type of music that's kind of stereotyped one way, to come and just practice yoga to it. Like, how amazing is it to give that space for people? And same with the rage yoga, to just show up and like, hey, we're all here because like we've got some anger, which everyone has anger. Like as humans, it's part of our like, daily spectrum of feelings. So allow that to be normal.
Yeah. And you're right. And it's funny. I still get people that come to me personally, like, I'll vent a frustration or something on Facebook or whatever. And somebody will come and be like, but you're a yoga teacher. Why are you mad? Like, you're not supposed to be mad. And I'm like, are you kidding? Like, you think because I'm a yoga teacher, I just don't have emotion anymore? Like, I'm just completely cured of any kind of, emotion that I might feel in a moment. No, like, and that I think people do feel that way. Like, oh, if you do yoga, you'll never be mad again. Or if you become a yoga teacher, you're not allowed to, you shouldn't be pissed off or anxious. I still have those feelings, but obviously what everybody knows is I use yoga to help with that stuff, and it helps keep it at a certain level. So I think people also will resonate with my truth of, guess what? I still get mad about stuff. I still have little rage fits. But the problem is, or the not problem, but the solution to that was, my yoga practice helps me instead of going from like 1 to 10 with the anger, it's like maybe 1 to 4, 1 to 5. And I can also come down quicker, or, calm down, or my anxiety. I could go from 0 to 100. But if I do go to 0 to 100 for like a minute or maybe an hour, it's not 10 days or like a year long thing like it used to be. It's like, now I have these tools to go, hey, guess what? I have I'm anxious right now, and I'm a human being, but let me go do my yoga. Let me do a breath work practice. Like, I have the realization. And that's the kind of stuff like I definitely want to convey is like, don't worry if one day you have a crap day. It's going to happen. That doesn't mean it's the end of the world or that you're a failure. It just means like you need to pay attention to yourself and do a little bit more self-care and try this breathing thing. You know what I mean? So it's just, I just want to definitely get rid of all those myths and debunk all that stuff for people.
Yeah, no, 100%. I love that. And I'm glad that you brought that up about yoga teachers too. I distinctly remember when I was teaching in Atlanta. So this was 4 or 5 years ago at this point, and I had to go to USPS after I taught a class, and I'm Canadian. So our postal service runs relatively similar, but not the exact same. So I waited in this massive line at USPS, and I was being, patient and stuff. And then I get up there, and the woman tells me I didn't have the right form and I hadn't filled things out right. And she's like, you need to move aside and get the right paperwork. And she's just basically dismissing me and already like, next, please. And I'm like, I'm sorry, can you just like help me? Because I didn't intentionally try to do this wrong. I just don't know what to do. Like, I'm not from here. I've never shipped something. I don't understand like what you need me to do. Can you just spend, 30 seconds walking me through it? I'll happily move aside and get it done so you can serve somebody else. And she was just not nice. I find the experience at USPS a rather unenjoyable one in general. So if somebody from USPS is listening, you guys got work to do. But it was just like I was getting so frustrated because she just wasn't helping me. And I looked behind me and I saw somebody who had been in my yoga class, and they, smiled at me and stuff. And I just felt this moment of like shame because I felt frustrated and angry with this woman who was being intentionally rude and totally unhelpful to me in a situation that I think could have been resolved really easily. And it's so interesting how we kind of have to come back to this idea that just because we're yoga teachers, we don't have to be perfect, Like,
Right.
it's not like I was screaming at this woman or anything. I just felt the feelings of frustration and anger and was trying to politely get her to help me figure out what to do. And yet, this moment that felt very human, I felt shame in because somebody in my class had seen it. And it was like, oh, I've let down this wall for this like facade of, I'm so zen all the time and I eat my, vegetarian food and that type of thing, which no hate on vegetarians or anything like that. That's totally a great personal choice if that's what you want to do. But yeah, I can really relate to that.
Yeah. And I feel like what would break my heart is breaking somebody's sort of maybe image of me, which is why I'm like, no, I can't create this image. I have to just be me, because I don't want somebody to like see me on a like a video and be like, Caitlin's a smiley person and she's so nice. And then like, they see me on the street and I'm this like jerk. Like, that's not what I want. And not to say that I would show up as a jerk or that I am a jerk, but I would rather, just be as honest as possible and just be exactly who I am on and off screen. I found that I was doing the thing where I'm like, the minute I start a video, I have this big smile and like, hey, and just this like false energy. And by the time I finish filming something, I'm like, I'm ready for bed. Like, that just drained me. So I'm just like, I can't find any other way to not drain myself than to just show up as me. And, people may not like it, but that's the point of niching, is it's for the people that you resonate with you and that you resonate with them. And if people don't resonate with you, there's like 100 million other coaches and wellness people out there that they could go to. So, it is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I honestly think the way that we like serve our students best is by being 100% ourselves, because I think that really this idea, and this came from me just, not having really stepped into my own as a yoga teacher. It's remembering that, all of our students that show up are, 100% human, and we need to be like that too. I think that the practice of yoga is so much more potent when we show up exactly as we are and we share that with our students and, talk to them about how it influences like our decision making and the way we react to things and stuff. I feel like those are the teaching moments, right? Like, nobody can really relate to this idea of somebody who's perfect. That just doesn't exist.
Yeah. And I am so far from that. And I own it in my own life. So might as well own it as a coach, as a wellness provider, as a business person. Cause, and for anybody listening out there, like, that's really what's going to get people to resonate with you, is being so authentic and real and just throwing your hands in the air and saying, hey, you know what? I'm a human. I'm not perfect. And, we all have work to do. So we're going to work together and, just do the best we can in this life we're living.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So bringing it back to online corporate wellness and niching down and all the goodness that we've talked about over the last little bit, can you share some of your top tips for anyone who is kind of interested in this area? Maybe somebody who was teaching corporate wellness and has just stepped aside from it over the last, gosh, where are we at now with this pandemic? Like 10 months, something like that, 9 months. Or somebody who's maybe looking to make the switch into this?
I would say definitely don't be afraid to take it online. I mean, there's people who I've spoken to already, like my network of people that I've been trying to get, their companies to hire me. And they've said, you know what, they already got a wellness, plan for us, or a program, and it was online. So corporations are looking for online wellness programs because, as it seems, at least, down here in my area, we're probably going to be back on this, long, dark lockdown where we're working remotely from home. So it just makes sense, these corporations are just, the time of just giving people a gym membership and expecting them to go, not only was that not really useful, maybe some people who are actually gym rats, which, power to them. I wish I was that person. But, for some people who just like, or also like me, where like, I'd rather be home, like doing something online is so much easier for certain people. Plus now, since we're home working remotely for the most part, and, it could be even a bigger lockdown again in the future, I just think that remote work is here to stay no matter what. There's been proven that, productivity's up for people who are working from home. That has its drawbacks as well, as far as like they've reduced the workforce. So people are getting inundated with work, which is why we need to step in and say, hey, the workforce that you still have left, they're being overloaded with work. I am a corporate wellness provider, and I'm here to help you, boost the productivity, maintain that, boost morale, and basically maintain your employees before they burn out. So we are very much needed. So don't ever feel like, if people aren't in an office setting, that they don't need us and can't access us. So that's why online is the way to go. I would definitely say hire a coach. If you're not familiar with corporate speak, I happen to have had a little bit of an advantage, obviously working in corporate, but also just, how to approach it, not just as a yoga teacher, because a lot of times we think that they want to hear, they'll meditate, I'll teach meditation and they'll be able to relax and calm. Like they don't particularly, they like to hear that stuff, but they want to also hear numbers and stats. Like they're numbers people. They want to make sure they're going to get return on investment. So like, these are things that you have to speak their language to, which I really personally, even though I was in corporate, didn't really know or familiar with those terms. And just also just making sure that you're staying consistent with that kind of language. They get kind of spooked by some of the woo-woo talk. Like I love my crystals and my mala beads, but I don't ever bring those up in conversation unless like it goes there. If somebody I talk to, they're like, oh yeah, I love yoga and I'm into that mystical stuff. Then I'll get into it and be more personal about it with them. But, for the most part, they're just looking for, is this going to work? Like, what's the proof here? Like, what are some stats you can give me to show me that corporate wellness works? And, with me, coaching has been super helpful, not only for like how to speak to corporate, but also like how to utilize my social media properly, like types of posts that they like to see, which platforms are the most useful, how to kind of change up your language per platform. There's so much that really goes into it. Because on your personal Facebook page, you can kind of take some liberties, but as something with LinkedIn, you have to be a lot more professional. And just like, what types of photos you should put up of yourself. It's a lot of marketing that goes into it. So if you don't really have a lot of familiarity with marketing and branding, like I had zero, for me, getting the coaching was super duper essential. Another tip, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, is utilizing your warm market. If people know people. So even if somebody that personally doesn't work in corporate, like a best friend of yours or a cousin or something or another yoga teacher, you can always hit them up and say, hey, I'm getting into corporate wellness. I would love and appreciate if you could rack your brain for me and see if there's somebody in your world that works in an office that could get me in like an email situation where I could introduce myself. That has been the most successful for me. I got two, one customer actually I've been working with, and then one I'm still in talks with, but these were all through personal relationships. Like the one customer that I'm working with was my best friend's mother. Never in a million years would I have ever thought she would have had the connection she had. So you just have to keep that in mind, keep an open mind. People know people. And also be sure to diversify your offers, like as much as, start thinking of yourself as not just a yoga teacher, you're a corporate wellness provider. So a lot of the big buzzwords right now are like mindset, team building. So, you can offer a yoga class, but you can also think about like workshops, bringing in guest coaches to talk about things that you're not, particularly a super expert on. Like I have a friend of mine that I was actually already thinking of today that I'm like, she's a money mindset coach. So I could probably bring her in and do a workshop about that. So always making sure that, you're not coming at them with like, hey, I just teach yoga. They're going to be like, okay, why am I investing so much money into just yoga? You want to make sure that you have a pretty decent benefit package that you're offering them. And I think that's kind of it.
Yeah, no, those tips are amazing. Thank you so much for those, Caitlin. And I just wanted to touch on actually the first one that you mentioned, which is about the online world. And I completely agree. Like, as we're heading into winter, I feel like, lots of countries around the world are going into their second form of shutdown, unfortunately. And I think on top of that, like, I think we're really realizing, like you said, how convenient it is to work from home, to be able to throw your laundry on in the morning, make lunch at home, pick up your kids from school, that type of thing, not have to commute. And I just really agree, like, not to disregard the fact that there are companies hiring. And I think even I was talking with a client of mine just last week, and she was saying, like, do you think there's even any point for me reaching out to new yoga studios? Because I work with a couple studios, and I was telling her how we've had so many teachers at one of the studios that I work with either like have to go into quarantine because they've been in contact with somebody who's been in contact with somebody who has the virus, or they've gotten sick and they've had to stay inside until they feel better. That we've been like, hiring new teachers to help sub and that type of thing. And I'm like, there's definitely opportunities. I think that don't discount just because we're kind of in this little bit of a lull or even headed into a little bit of a recession, that people aren't hiring, because I think people need yoga and people need yoga teachers.
Yeah. And also in the corporate aspect, just think about all of the events that in 2019 corporate has allocated budget wise. Like they probably allocated for maybe some in-person events, maybe some office lunch stuff, maybe like admin day or the holiday parties. Like none of that stuff happened. And they're probably not going to happen next year. So they have extra money in their budget that they need to reallocate. And if anything is super duper needed right now, it's the well-being of their employees, not only just their mental health, but their physical health, which we all know, yoga is great to keep your immune system up. So just think about it that way. Like they're not completely not spending their money. They're looking for different ways to allocate the funds that they were already given. So that's a chance for you to jump in and say, hey, do you have a budget for this? Or, is this something that you would love to like reallocate your all, predetermined budget for? Because that's what they're really trying to do. So yeah, never assume that they're not going to spend money on this stuff, because they do need it. I'm sure that they're starting to realize that it's something people really want. And if they want to maintain their employees and their wellness and stuff, they really need to start investing in their people's healthcare. And with the silver lining with COVID is that mental illness has become a bigger topic of conversation and less taboo. So I think they're starting to realize that they can't just ignore the fact that people are suffering right now from, anxiety and depression and just lack of motivation and all those things, which are totally real. And we're all feeling it, more so than others. So, that's something to consider too.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree with that. And I think this is a great place to wrap up this conversation. Thank you for everything that you've shared today. This has been such a potent conversation, so much good stuff in here. I'm curious, Caitlin, if people want to learn more about you and your offerings, where can they go to find that?
A couple of places. Well, I have my corporate wellness website. So if anybody just wants to give that a glance and just see, what I've put out into the world as far as, just website wise, I'm at www.caitlinredcorporatewellness.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Caitlin J. Schneider, and my Facebook group, which is the smaller group wellness coaching. That's I think me and you had discussed what the name of it was before. I changed it up a lot. And I won't curse because there is a curse word in there. It's called it's called the Uneffwithable Woman, a new level of confidence and power. And that can be found, you can just search that name, obviously, in the search of Facebook, or you can, I think the link is Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/be uneffwithable.
Amazing. I love it. I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes to all of that too, so that people can easily find you. And yeah, thank you again for your time today.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
All right, friends, I hope that you enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Caitlin Schneider. Make sure you go and check her out and all the goodness that she's doing in the yoga world. If you want to hear a little bit more from Caitlin, we talked about the top business lessons that she learned from running her online business over on M.B.Om behind the scenes. So you can get access to that over at patreon.com/M.B.Om yoga. I'd love to see you there. As always, a huge thank you to the sponsor for this episode of the show, OfferingTree. Make sure you go check them out, offeringtree.com/M.B.Om. They are seriously amazing, and I would love for you to go check them out. Let me know if you have questions, comments, feedback, any of that good stuff. And of course, thank you for tuning in today. It is such a treat to have you here with me for this episode and all other episodes of the show. So thank you so much for listening and for your support, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.